Alright, so I am at Blue Heron Lake here in San Francisco, formerly known as Stowe Lake, and I'm going to paint a familiar scene. I've painted this view many times before, but it's been over a year since the last time I painted it, so I thought it'd be fun to give it another try. I'm painting on a 16 by 20 inch panel. First thing I wanted to establish is the water line, trying to decide where I want the water line. I think I want it about a quarter of the way up from the bottom. I do want to feature some reflections, but the main focus is going to be this cypress tree right here. Sketching in burnt sienna, putting in some big shapes to try to get a feel for the composition. Like I said, this is a composition I've done before, but every time they come out different. So I think I like that ratio there, and then there'll be reflections down here in the water. Alright, so once I got the big shapes in place, I walk back about 15 feet, and I feel like these distant trees are too big in relation to the cypress. As you can see in the distance, I think I want these to be smaller so that the cypress stands out more. Alright, so I've got a little bit of mineral spirits on my paper towel. Just going to wipe out this area here. I think I want the trees to be kind of like that, maybe. And then obviously the trees in the foreground here have to be smaller as well. Something like that. I think that's better because then it really does feature the cypress, which is the thing I'm most interested in. Next thing I want to do is decide where I want these trunks. Usually I put in the trunks first, and then I will fill in the foliage around the trunks. So I'm looking for trunk placement and then the outline of the foliage against the sky. Those to me are the most important things. And this will be kind of dark in here, and this as well. So this sort of shape here is what's most important to me at this point. There will be sky holes in here to break it up a little bit as well. I do take my time at this stage of the painting just to make sure that I like the arrangement, because it's really difficult to change the arrangement once you've got thick paint down. Now I've got a mixture of ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson, and I'm gonna start putting in some of the tree trunks here and some of the branches. Now that I've got an idea of where I want them located, and I'm trying to make sure not to have like parallel lines, which is something that we often do, is sort of organize things a little bit too much. And the trunks are the most important thing. As far as branches go, I'm not as careful about those. Just kind of put some random strokes in here. And then, like I say, I'll be covering these branches and trunks with foliage. Alright, so there's a main trunk here. This is the biggest one, and then as it comes up, it splits off in various directions, coming out over like that. And this one goes straight up. And there's a fallen tree here that's sort of broke in half, and it's kind of hanging down into the water right here. In the past, I would have eliminated a detail like this just for the sake of simplification, but lately I've been trying to include some of these little irregular details just because I think it can make the painting more interesting. Actually comes up a little bit higher like that, and if I want to, of course, I can just remove it. So I'm going to start out by including it. Alright, so now that the trunks are in place, I'm just squinting at the trees to try to reduce the foliage into simple shapes, and I'm going to start blocking in those big shapes, going over the branches. And it sort of comes down like this, and then down at the bottom it kind of comes out like this. And some of these branches are pretty close to the water. So I've learned from experience that when painting trees, the sky holes are really important. not only just having sky holes, but how they're placed and the ratio of sky holes to foliage. In the past, I've painted this particular scene where I left too many sky holes, and that didn't really look too good. And then there's been other times where I didn't leave enough, and this felt like just a big solid mass. It was too heavy. For the distant trees, I've mixed up a gray-green using ultramarine blue, cadmium yellow medium, and some burnt sienna and titanium white, keeping this value at about a mid-tone value for now. Again, just focusing on shapes, all about the shapes. Actually, I want these to be a little lighter in value, so I've added some titanium white to the brush, and I'm just going to apply it directly to the canvas here. Just lighten it up a little bit, something like that. And then these trees here are a more saturated green. In reality, they're actually kind of cooler in temperature, more of a blue-green. But for now, I'm just going with approximate shapes and values. And so I'm not too worried about being totally accurate. There's a reflection here in the water, something like that. And the paint is really thin at this point, so it'll be easy to go over it with thicker paint and make those corrections. And the little bits of warm paint showing through actually will add interest to the final product, hopefully. I've got a darker green here for the reflection of the distant trees. And for this mixture, I used ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, alizarin crimson, and a bit of titanium white. And when I paint the reflections, I sort of do the same thing I do when painting the trees. I want to make sure that the trunks match up, and then I'll put in the foliage as well. Okay. All right, for the sky, I'm starting with a mixture of ultramarine blue and titanium white, and trying to work quickly and get some energy into the painting early on. And then I want to be careful not to eliminate all of the scrub in or all of the energy. I do want the drawing to be accurate. Like, I want the trees to be accurately represented, but I do want spontaneity in the painting as well. I don't want it to feel too tight or careful. It can be really challenging to balance those elements. I think painting on a larger canvas or a panel really does help. It gives you more room to swing the brush, so you don't have to be as careful. Filling in some of the sky holes here. Okay, now I'm putting the sky reflections in the water, trying to keep the edges soft here. That's one of the tricks to getting your reflections to read properly, is keeping those edges soft. I suppose there's times where you'd have hard edges in the reflections if there's no wind, but most of the time the edges are soft. All right, and there's some sky reflection in the distance as well, and then in the mid-ground, maybe like this. All right, at this point I've switched over to a natural bristle number 6, and I'm using loaded strokes to build up the painting from here, and I'm not using medium anymore. I was using liquid, but now I've just switched to paint directly out of the tube as far as thickness goes. And I'm cooling off some of these greens here, working into the existing shapes, trying not to break up the overall design. It's interesting, I'm noticing that I'm approaching the subject differently than I did last time I painted here. When I painted here last time, I was not completing the painting with loaded strokes, I'd kind of just scrub in the whole thing and then just scrub in thicker paint. I've really been enjoying putting in more deliberate strokes, more deliberate loaded strokes. For reflected objects, I usually go with vertical strokes, and I do try to keep some transparency in the paint when I'm painting reflections. I do want to leave some unpainted areas so that there are areas of thick and thin. It seems like good painting is a mixture of opposites, you know, like thick and thin, saturated, desaturated, light, dark, etc. All right, I'm including the lighter portion of the trees here using cadmium yellow lemon. I'm adding a little bit of variation to the edges of these reflections, but I do not want to break up the overall design. So still I'm paying attention to the shapes. I want to make sure that these shapes are interesting. All right, I've gone back to thinning the paint with liquid, reinforcing some of the darks here. And I do not want to make the tree too dark, but there are certain areas where I want some of this purplish color. I'm still using ultramarine blue mixed with alizarin crimson. So there are areas where I want this dark purplish mixture to kind of anchor the tree in a way, or to help the tree stand out from the distance. Most of these values are kind of mid-tone values here, so I want to go with some darker values for the tree. And just kind of taking my time, carefully looking at the shapes. And then I'll come over the top of this with greens. But it's nice to get some reds into a painting that's going to be mostly grays, blues, and greens. So there's little bits of the burnt sienna sketch. I'll try to leave some of that, and then also some of this purplish color as well. All right, at this point going in with thicker green paint, still trying to preserve the shapes here. But I will be adding lighter areas within the greens, but for now, adding the first layer of green. All right, so here's what I finished up with. This painting took about 2 hours to complete. It was finished on site. There's one change I'm considering making, and that's regarding this branch here, or this broken limb that hangs in the water. I feel like the bottom portion is okay, but this top portion is a little confusing, so I might clean that up or eliminate it. Other than that, I'm happy with the way this painting came out. As I've mentioned, I have painted this scene before. I feel like this painting is closer to a mid-tone than the paintings I've done of this scene in the past. And I do like that feel, the mid-tone feel, as opposed to having a really high contrast painting. The mid-tones allow the colors to be more visible, and there's just sort of a softer effect to it that I really do like. The process is the same process that I've been using in all my paintings lately, which is to scrub in with thin paint, and I'm thinning the paint with liquid. After I've got the big shapes blocked in, then I switch over to paint that has not been thinned. I'm using it the thickness that it comes out of the tube. And for the last couple months, I've been exclusively painting that way. And it is kind of challenging to finish the painting with thick paint. In a lot of ways, there's more control when the paint is thin, but I really like the look of the intentional thicker brush strokes in the finished painting. That's something I'm after these days. So one other thing I've mentioned is that I did add some red directly to the painting. I used a cadmium red light, and I was feeling like this painting was just a lot of blues and greens, and most of the sketch had been covered up. So as you guys know, I sketch in burnt sienna, so that I'll have little bits of orange in the painting. Most landscapes and seascapes are primarily blue and gray and green. So it's nice to get something in the red family in there, either red or orange. But most of the sketch got covered. There's little areas of the sketch, the burnt sienna sketch, that are showing through. but I didn't feel like there was enough red in it, so I just added bits of cadmium red light directly to some of the branches and tree trunks in here, and I feel like that gave the painting some additional vitality that it was lacking. Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you'd like to see some extra videos and help support the channel, there's a Patreon link down below. It's the Patreon support that helps keep me making these videos, and it's much appreciated, so check it out. Other than that, stay creative. I'll see you guys in the next video.